Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's not the Perkins from Electra Astrology. We're going to dive into that Leo-Aquarius axis today. And, we're all a little Leo. Let's face it. The Leo part of us is the part that wants all attention here, that is right, that is the best, the most beautiful, the most interesting. At least that's how we wish to be perceived. And it's holding hands with Aquarius, which is all you other people. So, we're going to talk about that today. Before we get started, if you don't have your hands on my Astrology is a Superpower ebook, you can get that below. There's a link for it. And of course, if you are listening to these teachings and you're wanting a reading to dive deeper into how all of this lands in your chart, you can find me at electraastrology.com. So we love Leo. We tend to be very attracted to that Leo energy, and we all have Leo in our chart somewhere. Leo is the archetype of the sun. It's the archetype of the heart, and it is also the archetype of the ego. And we know that when we're out navigating the world, and I've talked a lot about this in the previous few episodes on Aquarius, that there's this desire on some part to merge in with other people and what they're doing and what they're thinking and to belong and to be a part of the group. And then there's also a desire that can arise sometimes where we want to differentiate from the group. We don't want to be a part of the group and we're rebelling against the group or looking down on the group. In both cases, the ego is really involved. And you've heard me say before that the ego is neither good nor bad. The ego is just something that helps us to organize our personality, but that's really the key. It's the personality. And our personality is more of our rising sign. It's who we take ourselves to be. It's when we are wanting to come off a certain way and we're showing up. Look at me. I'm so pretty. I'm so smart. I'm so intelligent. I'm so rich. I'm so young. I have such good self-care routine, right? All of the things that we feel like we have to do sometimes to be perceived as being whatever. When we're looking at the sun and we're saying, like, yes, we have an ego, it's a defense system, it's an organizing system. We want to be accepted, we want to be seen as unique and special, and we want to be valued, basically. We're always seeking to get reflection from people around us when we're talking about our Leo parts or our sun. It's part of how we learn who we are, is by how people reflect to us and we say, well, that doesn't feel right, they're wrong. And therefore, we kind of know ourselves a little bit better because we're sure of what we're not. Or it's like, ooh, thank you. I am. Well, thank you. I'm so glad that you think I'm this thing. And oh, I must be this thing. But what we're trying to do with the sun is we are trying to learn who we really are. I'm trying to take that ego part of us that is just there to like tell us who we are, tell us who we want to be or what we should be. And we're trying to just settle into exactly who we really are, to that natural state of it's just me. Like, I'm not putting on an act and I'm not trying to get approval or fit in, and I'm not acting out of my trauma or out of my history. I'm just me. And a lot of times, what we'll find is that when we're negotiating other people, that Aquarius collective, the more settled in who we actually are, the easier it is. I've talked in the last few episodes asking why are other people so weird, looking at the shadow of Aquarius around all of this conforming or rebelling. But the truth is that we can be pretty relaxed out among other people, but we have to disengage from that part of us that's always trying to control. You're annoying, get out of my way. Why are you so slow? Why do I always have to listen to your bizarre opinions? Why do I always have to try to fit into your group? Right. And when we're trying to like wrestle our way into the collective in some way, that's when it gets really stressful. When we're trying to be somebody that we're not, or our ego is in there trying to assert and dominate, pay attention to me, look at me. That's when the collective is really hard and exhausting and frustrating. So you can think about how often that ego part of you, that organizer that says, well, this is who I am. I was born here. I like this kind of food. I've dated this kind of person. That ego that's organizing and reminding you who you are. And then also that ego that has all these positions, all these desires that says, you have to be this and you have to get that. And people need to see you like that. That's all this sort of false personality stuff. So while you're listening to the teaching, or for the next week or so, while this teaching is on your mind, you can look at how often that organizing ego, that demanding ego, is actually in there meddling with your relationship to other people, to the collective. Sometimes just being able to see it can shift it for you. So the guidance this week really is to practice settling into who you are and just reflecting back to yourself who you are. We're not always needing reflection from out there, it feels like it, but there's something about just reflecting, this is what's true for me right now. This is what I'm experiencing right now, that can be a really like satiating way to deeply understand yourself and make it easier for you to navigate through other people. So, if you are new, the following teaching is one from my podcast that I released in 2024. I went through all the sun signs. I am editing them and re-releasing them so that they're all going to be on YouTube under Astrology for Awakening. You can go into that playlist and find all of the archetypes. Right now, I'm going through each sun sign while the sun is in that sign. So, I'm going through sun signs in real time. I'm also releasing currently new asteroid videos. So my goal with all of this is to help you understand yourself a little bit better, help you be a stronger, more centered, and content person on the planet because we need that. A lot of outrage and confusion swirling around, but we need everybody to practice holding their center in as much as possible. So let's give it a try. Here's my contribution to that. All right, let's jump into the teaching. Astrology is a system that helps you to understand what is happening in your life so that you can make different choices, feel validated, or just see the bigger picture. It's always funny when people poo-poo astrology or they say they don't believe in astrology. And I laugh and think, well, you're welcome to be out there trying to figure all of this out on your own. Astrology really is just a way to help you organize and comprehend what you are doing here in this particular human life on the planet at this time, because there is so much more than meets the eye. We are very trained to see things through the lens of the mind and the brain and try to make things fit those parameters. And the truth is, there's more. There are many, many wide and interesting worlds that one can tap into. We talked about the transition from Capricorn into Aquarius and how we come to rely on rules so that we can create a structure, so that we can all operate under the same structure, the same understandings. If we're all following the same laws and we're all on the same path, things go smoother. As we transition into Aquarius energy, naturally, we begin to look at the rules and the regulations that we've set up, at the agreements that we as a society make with one another for things to go smoothly. And we can find problems. Start to understand, like, this isn't working, that worked better, let's change this. And that is healthy. And that is what Aquarius does for us, is it brings us into the intellectual state of being able to see what needs to change. Because Aquarius is a sign of the collective, it is energy where we are all having to work together. We also know that in any given collective, it's hard to get everybody to agree to any one thing. We know that people can drive us nuts. A lot of people are really hard to be around. A lot of groups, especially if we're in disagreement with the group, or if the group seems so totally different from us that we feel intimidated or fearful. And these are human nature things. We like to idealize and think that we should all get along, should all understand one another and have tolerance for one another and support one another. And that is nice. And hopefully there are many different people and many groups in our lives that we are able to do that with. But it would be remiss to pretend that that was always possible, because we are simply going to come up against things about people we don't like, things that drive us nuts. And people are going to feel that way about us too. So as we are now
really into this Aquarius energy. It's very important that if you are somebody that has a distaste or a dislike of a certain group, that you get curious about that. Why? What is it? What is it about you that makes you dislike or fear or resist or feel like you're in comparison to this group? We have to understand our relationship to people. We see a very sick world when we look around. We are very polarized. We are taught to dislike one another. It's been very obvious in the mainstream media, especially over the last 5 years, how we are pitted against one another. One group is sold as bad, the other group is sold as good. And it doesn't really matter. Everywhere you look, there's conflict. As we are now in a new era of Aquarian energy, we want to look at that conflict. And so we are talking this week about Leo versus Aquarius. With Leo, this is the sign that the sun rules. We just talked about the sun and how important it is to self-understand, to continue over and over to get a handle on who you are. We change all the time. We're very dynamic. We turn into different people when we are around different people. If you've had several romantic relationships, you might notice that while there is a baseline to who you are, but there are plenty of aspects of you that shift and change depending on who you're in relationship with, or even which friends you're around. And that's because we are so multifaceted. There are so many things about us that are ever changing and dynamic. And the more that we are right there along, consciously paying attention to that, the easier things will be. And that is Leo. Leo is me, my needs, my desires, my joy, the things that make me laugh. And Aquarius, which is across the zodiac, is about the people around me. It's the audience. If Leo is the actor, Aquarius is the audience. With Aquarius, we know that we are not living in a vacuum. We are always living with other people, neighbors, colleagues, family members, whether we like them or not, whether they're like us or not. And we have to understand who we turn into when we are around other people. So, who you are when you're sitting in your car listening to music is really different than who you are when you're walking through the grocery store aisles. And, we're always navigating in between both of those versions. This is the real me, this is the public facing me. This is how I see myself, this is how I see others. And you've heard that saying, as above, so below. What we see a lot is that when we are seeing something outside in the world, when we are seeing somebody that is different than us and it's making us angry, when we're feeling frustrated or we're feeling distaste for another person or another group of people, usually there is something inside of us that feels very similar to what we see outside in the other that we don't like. And our distaste for them is simply a projection around something that we don't like about ourselves, which is why we need to self-inquire to understand that person that talks too much irritates me. Well, why does that person irritate me? Because they talk too much. Oh, perhaps because there is a part of me that when I talk too much, I get embarrassed. Maybe I was shamed for talking too much as a kid. And now I have decided that people that talk too much are bad. It's a way to keep me safe. And then I project that judgment out onto the people around me. But when we start to inquire into why don't we like a certain kind of person or a certain group of people, and we say, I don't like them because they remind me of me, then we can begin healing. It's not about having to change the way that we feel about somebody, but there is something potent about the internal healing of seeing yourself as that child who was judged for talking too much or being too loud or whatever, and meeting that child and saying, it's okay. It's okay. You can talk all you want. Doesn't matter what other people think. And so we will be working with this all through Aquarius season and then into the next 20 years, separating ourselves from what other people think about us and working to understand when we have conflict or drama with another person or a group of people, why that is. How did it start? There's usually way more to the story than we initially see. We have to know ourselves in order to even get into that story. And it's incredibly important to be doing this kind of work because we are moving with Pluto and Aquarius into a society where we will be relying on people. It is less about that Capricorn capitalism of everybody for themselves, make as much money as possible, and that's where the value lies, into something that looks more like I bring my skills and gifts to the table, you bring your skills and gifts, and then we have a complete and cohesive system. But we want to be able to get along with people, even when they're difficult. And we want to be able to see ourselves clearly so that we know where we fit into the group, into the collective. So just close your eyes for a minute and just take some deep breaths. It's a lot to think about. And as you are taking some deep breaths into the center of your body, just get a sense of how that information lands. How does it feel when you think about your relationship to society and to the collective? And how does it feel when you think about how other people perceive you? We've all had situations where we have been on the outs. We have been the object of teasing. We've all been bullied. We've probably all been bullies. This is a week where you can begin to think about both sides. What has it felt like to be included? What has it felt like to include others? And what has it felt like to be pushed out and excluded, ignored? And what has it felt like when you have excluded and ignored others? So this whole month is an invitation into exploring how you relate to being a part of a human society while also wanting to maintain and understand that you are an autonomous, unique being of your own. Energy well spent is when you're getting solidified, you're learning to hold your own center by knowing who you are, what your values are, by being educated. Educate yourself so that it helps you to understand your own role in the world and understand other people.